Hey, this is Art Haglund, and I did a little animation video to show how gradual evolution is just impossible. And the reason it's impossible is because the basic truth of survival of the fittest. Basically, survival of the fittest explains why a moth with two different pigmentations in its genome will produce white moths or lighter colored moths where birch trees are prevalent, and brown moths where dark bark trees are prevalent and there's almost no birches. Basically, it explains that the genes that are not advantageous for whatever reason get eliminated due to predation. They fall victim to predators. Now, that's not the only reason. An animal will also die off because it doesn't have the strength. It loses, according to evolution, certain traits that are necessary in an environment to continue living. Human beings are an excellent example of the impossibility of evolution. If we were to come from a common ancestor as other primates, the simians, we are at a great disadvantage because we do not have the strength they have. We do not have fur, which protects us from injury, scrapes and things like that, minor injury, protects us from the heat and the cold, protects us from the wet. We also do not have the speed that they have. So, as evolution claimed to be a gradual thing, we would be competing with a cousin animal that would, again, they said that we have a common ancestor. So from animal A comes a branch of human beings. We will say that will be branch 1, and the simians, the other primates, come from branch 2. So as these branches diverge, we are now, according to evolution, cousins. We will lose strength, speed. We cannot eat things that they eat. We cannot eat a raw monkey without it adversely affecting us, but gorillas do eat smaller monkeys raw. Obviously, they don't cook anything. So this animation is going to show how a gradual evolution doesn't help the idea of evolution, but what it does is it makes evolution even harder, because through every step of the way there's a change, which is another missing link, which they have no fossils for, and it shows the growing disadvantage from functional animal 1 to functional animal 2, that is the completed evolution. The stages in between become non-functional. They will not let the animal live as animal 1, and yet they are not evolved enough to live as animal 2. So what I'm going to show is an animation from a ground-dwelling and burrow-digging animal to a flying animal similar to a bat. And it's not a real good animation, but it will show gradual change. And you can stop it any way along there and look and see how these gradual changes have to occur. A limb has to get longer, has to turn into a wing. The back legs get shorter. So these things have to occur. So as you can see, the gradual changes here, and I made this a 10-second 240 frame. So there's actually 240 different steps in the change from this ground-dwelling, burrow-digging mammal unto its end result of a bat-like tree or cave-living animal. And if you will note that almost immediately the front limb becomes useless for digging a burrow. The rear limb starts to become shorter and shorter, so an animal like this would no longer be able to run as fast. An animal like this would soon lose its ability to dig a burrow. Can't fly yet. Doesn't have the advantages that a bat or a bat type animal has. It also loses the advantages of a ground dwelling burrow digging animal. So survival of the fittest at this point shows that it doesn't have advantages of either species, either animals. These transitions become slower, weaker, less apt to survive. They would fall victim wholesale to predation. Also, the animal would not be able to fly until it is completely animal number 2, the evolved bat-like animal. Probably in this animation there would be a point to where it could glide. However, what we have seen with some flying animals like birds, that it is possible that they can not learn to fly. So without a flying, excuse me for yawning there, without a flying parent, how is this animal going to know that it can fly once it has reached the actual ability of flight as opposed to gliding? How will it know that it can continue farther and farther and farther? We have what we call flying squirrels. They can't really fly, they can glide. But if this flying squirrel were to evolve greater abilities to where it could actually flap and fly, how would it know? How would it know that it can finally fly when its parents couldn't? There would be a point where one generation cannot, and due to gradual change, the next generation can. It's quite a bit like pain or hunger or other bodily functions. One moment it's not there, the next moment it is. One moment it is there, the next moment it's not. These gradual things have to work that way. Now, I'm not saying that there's necessarily a straight line graph that you could graph one to another, but if there's not, then that means at some point on the graph it's steeper than other points, where a change has to be greater from one generation to another than a general gradual slow change over millions of years. Like I said, my little animation there has actually 240 steps. Well, animals like rats, mice, they might breed, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 10 times a year. Times a million years. We're now talking 10 million generations. 10 times a year. 10 million generations of one generation distinctly and necessarily different from another. It isn't the generation before. Gradual evolution is a lie of terminology, because there are only 2 possible ways an animal can change. It can change from parent to child. There is a difference in the birth. It is no longer animal A, it is now animal B. The other possible change is animal A is born animal A, and sometime during its lifetime, somehow, some outside or internal thing happens to animal A to change it into another species during its own lifetime. So you have it. You have the change by reproduction. Animal A gives birth to animal not A. Or you have animal A being changed into animal B during its lifetime. And of course, everyone knows, the evolutionists know, that's never the case. So they're stuck with what they say gradual evolution. They deny that a duck has an egg that becomes an alligator, or vice versa. They laugh, they say it's ridiculous, but that's the only choice that they're left with, is a generational evolution, one by one. Now, they like to say gradual for this other fact, because they don't want to admit that animal A gives birth to animal B, so they say gradual. Well, there's no such thing as gradual. Even if you transfer, grow from 1 to 2, it's not gradual. You have 1.01, 1.02, 1.03, and none of those are 1. They are different. They're distinctly different. You get to 1.5. 1.5 definitely is not 1, and it's definitely not 2. It is a distinct and different number. And a gradual evolution is an attempt by wording, by terminology, to deny that these other animals are distinct species, as they would call them. And there is no answer. Evolution has no ability to explain this other than by saying it took a long time. Well, seeing as how evolution has only two choices, something happens after an animal is already alive to change its species, which they deny, they are left with a generational change. And this generational change, by necessity, means that animal A gives birth, lays an egg, reproduces in whatever fashion to an animal that is no longer its own kind, its own species. It'll be animal A.1, 1.0001. Well, you got a million years, you got 10 million steps. You've got 10 million different missing links between animal 1 and animal 2. 10 million missing links. They can't provide one missing link. They definitely cannot provide 10 million missing links. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed it.